Solo Leveling by Chu Gong. Chapter 75. The End of the War. The two monarchs' ferocious battle left remnants in the sky as the ash they had kicked up now drifted down peacefully like snow. Jinwu watched the first few flecks land on his shoulders, then looked up. Miles above his head, the armies of the rulers blocked out the sky as they continued to emerge through the countless gates. Tens of millions of soldiers moved in an orderly fashion as commanded by the rulers. It was an overwhelming sight. Their mission was to purge the earth of the monarch's forces. Now that most of the monarchs, including the Dragon King, had been eliminated, the armies of chaos stood no chance. So the arrival of the soldiers signaled to them that the long, drawn-out war was finally over. As he watched them depart for the battlefield, Jinwu was surprised to feel his heart ache. The indescribably beautiful brightest fragment of luminosity landed in front of Jinwu and folded in his 6 wings. The other rulers followed in turn. The brightest fragment of luminosity took in the man before him. At a glance, Jinwu seemed to be an ordinary human being. And yet, this single human ended the war between us and the monarchs. Who could have imagined that the never-ending war started by the supreme being would be brought to an end by the hands of a fragile creature in a distant world? The surprised brightest fragment of luminosity had nothing but respect for Jinwu. "You have ended our war. I do not know how to express our appreciation." Jinwu looked away from the falling ash to face the brightest fragment of luminosity. "It's a big ask, but I'd like to request a favor." "A favor?" The ruler was puzzled. The Shadow Monarch's power was comparable to theirs, possibly even stronger, but he had a favor to ask of them. Jinwu explained. "This is something only you can do." The ruler acquiesced. "As long as it is within my power, I shall lend my aid." The Shadow Monarch had contributed much to the demise of the Dragon King, so the rulers were indebted to him. There was no reason why the rulers couldn't grant Jinwu's request. However, his favor was a rather difficult one to fulfill. "One more time. Could you use the cup of reincarnation one more time?" The request completely blindsided the rulers, and they stared at Jinwu with their malice agape. The brightest fragment of luminosity asked, "You want us to use the cup of reincarnation to reverse time?" "That's right." Jinwu firmly nodded. "And once you've rewound time, I ask that you leave Earth alone. I'll take care of the monarchs and their armies myself in the rift between dimensions." Jinwu's request left the brightest fragment of luminosity speechless. He wants to fight in our stead? The previous Shadow Monarch had explained the mechanics of the Cup of Reincarnation to Jinwu. According to Ashbourne, higher beings like the rulers and monarchs retained their memories even if a forbidden tool was used to undo the past. Now that Jinwu and Ashbourne had combined into one being, he would retain the Shadow Monarch's powers and memories, which would allow him to enact his plan and venture into the rift between dimensions. "You mean to deal with the enemy's army all by yourself?" The brightest fragment of luminosity asked in disbelief. "But why? We have used the Cup of Reincarnation again and again, but we have never had better results than this." Jinwu glanced down at his father's dagger. "This war has claimed far too many lives. I want them back." If reversing time meant saving those people, Jinwu was fully prepared to face the monarchs all over again. The brilliant fragment of luminosity closed his eyes in contemplation. He agreed with Jinwu's reasoning, but reversing time was extremely risky. "The Cup of Reincarnation is at the end of its life. While I do believe in your proven ability, we will not get another opportunity should your plan fail." A harsher, more terrifying future could await them. In other words, the current situation might already be the best possible outcome. "You could forever remain in people's memories as the hero who stopped the invasion of the monarchs. However, no one save yourself will remember the war you seek to initiate. If you lose, destruction awaits. Even if you win, no one will celebrate your victory. The brightest fragment of luminosity's sorrow was evident. Do you still wish to reverse time? Instead of answering, Jin-Woo closed his eyes and thought of the people important to him. Through the eyes of the soldiers he'd placed in their shadows, Jin-Woo could see them in this moment. His mother and sister were clutching each other's hands as they watched the news coming from Japan with concern. Hain was praying desperately with her eyes shut tight. Jinchul's teary eyes were glued to his TV. Jin-Woo basked in the warmth of their genuine concern. When he opened his eyes, he had made his decision. Yes! Reverse time. For those who yet lived, and for the fallen, President Gun Hee-go, Adam White, his father. And there were many more people who had become casualties of war. Jin-Woo was determined to never lose anyone ever again. To the brightest fragment of luminosity, his resolve was ironclad. The rulers had deigned to go as far as using a forbidden tool to save this world only because it had become their battlefield. But now, the hero, a citizen of the world he had saved, was choosing to save the entirety of the world instead of settling for saving a fraction of it. And not only that, but he also wanted to shoulder the burden all by himself. For a second, the brightest fragment of luminosity thought he saw Ashbourne's face overlapping Jinwoo's. The previous Shadow Monarch had been a stubborn colleague who stood his ground to protect his master, the Supreme Being, until the bitter end. He had been a terrifying enemy, but the brightest fragment of luminosity held just as much respect for him. This man resembles him. The thought of Ashbourne brought a gentle smile to the ruler's face. I see. Then I shall pray for your victory. Hold on. Ji-woo had a question. What happens to the soldiers who didn't exist in the past? For example, Baru? Ashbourne's original soldiers would remain as shadow soldiers. But what would happen to Baru, who hadn't existed 10 years ago, or Greed, who had been created from a human named Dong Su Huang? Beings who will overlap in the past will disappear, while the others will remain. In other words, Baru would stay but Greed would disappear. Jin-Woo could hear the lamentations of the soldiers in his shadow. In his mind, he bid farewell to the soldiers who would have to depart. Then he looked up with a grin. I'm ready. The brightest fragment of luminosity summoned the cup of reincarnation from a different dimension and nodded. May your courage save your world. The world was bathed in light. Soon after, a local newspaper published a short article about a middle school student who disappeared and left behind a note saying that he had some business to take care of. 2 years later, the safe return of the missing middle school student caused a small stir. But the world quickly returned to normal, and time quietly passed as if nothing had happened. There was no longer any need for gates, magic beasts, or hunters. Jinho was frozen stiff at the welcome party for incoming freshmen. Despite the mouth-watering smell of grilled pork belly permeating the store, his nerves made him lose his appetite. And it was the strangest thing. Though he was currently keeping his family situation on the down low, he'd led a pretty cushy life as the second son of a wealthy businessman. So why did this very affordable frozen pork belly franchise feel so familiar? What's up with that? One of the upperclassmen slung his arm around Jinho's shoulders. Loosen up, Jinho. I promise we don't bite. Flustered, Jinho squeaked. And no, it's not like that, sir. That right there, stop talking like that. The upperclassman teased him with a laugh, then paused. Oh, but there is one guy you should be careful around. There's this really scary guy in our department. Oh. Jinho tensed up. He's one of those, you know. It's not like he gives his juniors a hard time per se, but his charisma is off the charts, so that it's hard even standing next to him. Jinho knew someone exactly like that. His father, the iron-blooded CEO. He quickly shook his head to get rid of that thought. The upperclassman seemed to be getting rather tipsy, as he continued chattering loudly about the scary man. "Do you know Hain Cha? You mean the shining star of the track and field world, the athlete Hain Cha?" "Yeah, her. She's his girlfriend, if you can believe it. Whoops, here he comes." The upperclassman bolted to his feet and gave a polite bow as another young man entered the restaurant. "Hello, sir. Sir. Hi, sir." It was clear from the sight that the upperclassman hadn't been exaggerating. The mood at the loud and lively welcome party for freshmen changed completely with his appearance. Jinho's mouth went dry. It was just his luck that the scary man took a seat right next to him, even though Jinho was so nervous he couldn't bring himself to lift his head. Oh no! Of all the empty seats. Jinho quietly sighed to himself when the scary upperclassman handed him a glass. "Have a drink." Was he seriously handing him an entire glass of soju? Jinho figured it wasn't a joke and was unable to refuse. "I'm not much of a drinker, though." Jinho squeezed his eyes shut and forced himself to take a sip. His eyes widened at the taste. Is this soda?" "That's right." The supposedly scary upperclassman waved the bottle of soda in his hand with a friendly expression. "Wanna help me finish this off?" In fact, the upperclassman seemed happy and relaxed, like he was meeting up with an old friend. "And Jinho, what's with the sir? Come on now." He laughed as he refilled Jinho's empty glass. "Just call me bro." "Pardon? What? You don't like it?" When the smile slipped off the upperclassman's face, Jinho instinctively straightened his back and answered firmly. "And no, I do, boss." "Huh?" He called him boss without thinking, but it somehow felt right. "And did I ever tell him my name?" Jinho broke out of his thoughts as the upperclassman clinked his glass against Jinho's. "Cheers!" There was something so familiar about that smile. Jinho blinked away tears as he toasted him back. "Cheers!" Jinho's voice came over the phone. "By the way, boss, why didn't I see you in the student lounge?" Jinwoo chuckled. "I have an errand to run today." "Oh, and Jinho?" "Yes, boss. Something came up, so I'm counting on you to go to my afternoon class for me." "Huh?" "Hang on, boss." "Boss?" Jinwoo ignored Jinho's desperate calls and hung up. Click. Jinwoo took in the big sign of the Seoul Ilshin Hospital up ahead. There was someone he needed to meet today. He had paused to straighten out his clothes before entering the hospital when a familiar face caught his eye. Jinwoo wasn't planning on getting her attention, but she felt his stare and turned. It was Juhee, the B-rank healer who frightened easily, but still had joined the Hunters Association to try to put her powers to good use. Now, she was just an ordinary college girl. She seemed to be flourishing now that she wasn't a hunter, so Jinwoo couldn't hold back a pleased smile. Juhee stared at Jinwoo for a while before working up the courage to ask him, Do I know you?" Jinwoo swallowed the instinctive greeting that rose in his throat and shook his head. "No." Without missing a beat, he turned around. Juhee stared at his back for a while, then shrugged and went on her way. Jinwoo gave a satisfied grin as he listened to her footsteps get farther away. This was exactly what he'd fought so hard to protect: peaceful days, and the lives they were meant to live. Running into the fruits of his labor every so often like this served as yet another reminder that it had been worth it. Good enough for me. This was good enough for Jinwoo. Jean Wu stopped in front of the hospital for a bit to look down at the permanent burn scar on his left hand before slowly making his way inside. If anyone ever asked him about it, he would tell them he got it while saving the world. The patient waved over the attending physician.
"Could you help me sit up?"
The doctor rushed over and carefully helped lift the patient's torso.
"Thank you."
The doctor noticed a wooden bottle on the patient's bedside table that he'd never seen before.
"What's this, sir?"
The patient, who had lost so much weight that he resembled a withered tree, was racked with coughs as he explained.
"Some young man came in just now and gave it to me."
The attending physician was alarmed. This was a VIP room, and 2 burly bodyguards stood by the door around the clock. No visitors were allowed to enter without the doctor's permission, so who could have waltzed in here and left this bottle?
Strange, don't you think? And the young man told me something even more unbelievable.
According to the young man, he and the patient had fought against monsters in a previous timeline that no longer existed. The young man had come to give him a token of appreciation for all the help the patient had given him.
Then the young man disappeared just like that, like a mirage. It was like he was never here.
Had there been no evidence, the doctor wouldn't have given this story a second thought. But with the bottle left plainly on the table, the doctor didn't know what to make of things. The patient pointed a shaky finger at the bottle.
"Bring it to me."
The doctor put the wooden bottle in the patient's hand. The patient chuckled.
"He said drinking the contents of this bottle would cure my illness." "Sir, surely you don't believe. I am tired."
The patient cut off his doctor.
"Let me ask you one thing. Let's say I don't drink this. How much time do I have left?"
The doctor couldn't answer him. Modern medicine was barely keeping the patient alive. In fact, that he'd lasted this long was a miracle. The patient sucked his teeth at his doctor's silence.
"If this drink does me in, write this on my tombstone. Here lies President Gunny Go. He fought his illness to the end." "Sir."
As a doctor, he should have stopped his patient, but he couldn't bring himself to do so. The determined chairman popped open the lid and swallowed the liquid with difficulty. Gulp, gulp. As he poured the last drop into his mouth, President Go recalled the look in the eyes of the young man who had given him the bottle. No matter what anyone said, President Go had decided that he could trust a young man with eyes like that. Once the bottle was empty. Ba-dump. Ba-dump, be-a-dump, be-a-dump. President Go's faltering heartbeat stabilized for the first time in a long while. The heart was beating properly once more.